And we are live. I have the great pleasure to introduce Scott Augenbaum, who is a former supervisor special agent for the FBI Cyber Security Division. Hi, Scott. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining.
Hey, David, can you see the big smile on my face?
Yes, it's feels like half the screen, so I can see it.
Yeah, that's because I'm retired from the FBI. And if you would have told me some 34 years ago that this kid from Brooklyn, New York, Kingsborough Community College graduate, 2.27 grade point average, would be retired from the FBI, be talking, living in Nashville, Tennessee, wrote a book about cybersecurity, and be able to come back and talk to you about it, I would have said, no way, not my life. And thank you so much for reaching out to me to share some of my experiences with you and my listeners. I love your show, and I think you're doing a great job of what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much, and we'll jump right into it. So you have a fascinating background. How you got to be in the FBI. What was kind of your first couple years in the force, and maybe we'll start there. And you have like a fascinating journey.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people always dreamed about being a police officer. And I joke, and I was raised by a single parent back in the 80s in New York. We all remember how tough it was back in New York City back in the 80s. And when I went from seventh grade to eighth grade, my mom was so excited. When I went to community college, she was excited I was going to college. When I graduated and I didn't do very well, she was happy. And then she always was on the lookout for me on the civil servant jobs. And she actually, David, applied for me to join the FBI when I was 20 years old as a file clerk, making $5.50 an hour in New York City. Can you believe that?
Yeah, that's incredible. But you know what? I think that there's a certain quality of individuals that are in the forces and manage to succeed in certain profile. I was in the Air Force, and I can tell you that people that went through a certain type of training, it's almost they have certain attributes of quality that they possess. Uh, in your opinion, after spending so much time in the force, what type of attributes do you possess specifically that were able for you to be successful in what you did?
Well, I got in at a really, really young age. I was impressionable and I was surrounded by a lot of father figures, a lot of these older veteran guys. And I just listened and I just paid attention. And I was a clerical employee with the FBI. And they kind of pressured me into becoming an FBI agent. I really never thought I'd be able to do it. I went down to Quantico, Virginia. I'm going to be honest, it's not a good time to go to the academy and try to get in shape. And I struggled. I'm going to be honest with you. I was a little overwhelmed. A couple of times I wanted to quit, but I didn't quit and I didn't give up. So it's having that tenacity. And I tell people all the time it doesn't matter where you come from or what your abilities were or are. It matters what you do. And for me, the ability that I had that I think made my career very, very successful, and I think it was successful, communication skills, and being honest and being genuine and actually caring about people. Because that's one of the things that I learned in my career. And I'm so blessed. I've gotten in front of so many victims. I've listened to their stories. And that's why I'm here today, is to just kind of take what I've learned. And when I'm coaching people now to what is the number one quality it takes to become an FBI agent, look, they can teach, you can get in shape. That's pretty easy. You can learn how to shoot a gun. You can kind of learn how to even get better in management and organization. But do you have that skill set to really be empathetic, to be able to listen without judgment, to be able to get to know people and to be able to understand? Because communications has saved me so many times. So that's really what I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you also have this tremendous ability to connect with people. I know that when we chat on the phone, I could almost sense that you know you've talked to, I don't know how many people you've talked on the phone in your career, or how many people you've met, sometimes through difficult situations. The fact that you were able to very quickly create that rapport with the person. It's not a skill that it's easy to manage. But I mean, after so many years, you've naturally do this today.
Well, and let me ask you, are communicators, are they made or are they born? What do you think? Because I have my opinions about that.
I think it's a 50-50 thing. I think it's in nature and nurture. I think there's something to be said, and I think if you lack the kind of nature piece of it, you can definitely overcome that by hard work and perseverance.
Great point. Because let's be real. I was a very timid kid. I wasn't organized. I wasn't a good communicator. I really didn't have a lot of confidence. And, I just didn't give up. And a lot of times I really, really wanted to give up. During my career, people ask me all the time. I go around, I do presentations, and people say, Scott, I want to do what you do. I want to be a public speaker. I want to be a professional. I want to get up in front of audiences and get paid. And I go, it's really easy and it's really simple to do. I like to use the term frameworks. If you take a framework and you follow it, you can get the same results. So if anyone really wants to be paid as a speaker, it's really easy. Just do 1,000 presentations for free and be good at it, and people will do it. And let me tell you, David, when I started talking to people, very, very awkward, a lot of uncomfortable silence, but know your material, be genuine, and talk about it. And that's what I've done in the world of cybersecurity awareness. I've taken a dry topic, I've interjected my own stories. And what I want to share with you is during my career, I had the opportunity to interview almost 1,000 cybercrime victims. I looked in their eye, I didn't read it in a book. These aren't Harvard business case studies. These are me going out and talking to individuals. And I wrote about it extensively and I talk about it all the time. It's called The Four Truths About Cybersecurity.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I want to dive into that quickly, but before we do that, tell me the story of how from being a clerk, to going to the FBI training academy, and then even more so, how did you like jump into cyber, because cyber wasn't a thing back then.
No. And so, okay, I show up at the FBI Academy. I get through it. I show up to the office and I just remember completely overwhelmed. And I had a couple of really unbelievable mentors. I had some older guys who took me under their wing to make sure I didn't fail, and they took me out. And if I would describe the role of an FBI agent for you in 1995, 96, it was so easy to explain. Bad people did bad things to good people, and I worked with state and local cops, and we put bad guys in jail. What a fun and exciting job for this 27-year-old kid from Brooklyn, New York. A gun, a badge, a bulletproof vest, a car with lights and sirens. And I'll never forget the first piece of advice I was told by one of the senior agents. He said, Scott, when you flash your badge, it's probably the first time ever someone's going to meet an FBI agent to the last time. So have this really good impression. And for me, kind of being a little bit of an underachiever, I worked really hard. I was single. I put the hours in, and I realized, David, something which was quite interesting. The harder I worked, the more bad people I put in jail. And the more bad people I put in jail, the better I felt about myself. So I don't know if maybe you can relate to that as a sales guy or anything. Do you know how a salesperson feels after they close a really big deal? How do they feel?
They feel great.
Yeah.
They feel absolutely great. They feel like they've helped somebody.
That's
That's the
how
key.
I felt, David. I
Hmm.
felt like I was helping people. And then I get sucked into the world of cybercrime because I'm the only agent in the office who has a home computer. And
That's
the
an
only,
incredible story.
well, and the only reason I have a home computer is I'm familiar with Windows 95. And the only reason I'm familiar with Windows 95 is because of America Online. And by default, I become the cyber agent in the office, which is not the cool and fun, sexy job to have. I'm in Syracuse, New York. I'm with two female agents that were both incredible agents. One worked drug cases. She's super cool. The other one's working healthcare and is doing drug and fugitive work. They're cool. And then here I am. I'm the cyber guy. And back in 98, we're chasing thrill seekers. We're chasing amateurs. We're chasing kids by the name of Mafia Boy. And then about 99 or so, cyber takes a very, very sinister twist because of e-commerce. We start seeing more and more cyber cases are going. I'm the cyber guy. I can't get rid of it, but it's like kind of a side duty. And I'm still working bank robberies, fugitives. I'm helping with those cases. I love white collar. September 11th happens, and I'm working terrorism cases, but I'm getting all of this training on the side for cyber. Now, in 2003, I take a promotion to FBI headquarters to work in the newly formed cyber division, not because I want to work cyber, not because I want to be a supervisor, because I met my wife in Atlanta in 1997, and she's from Houma, Louisiana. And what do you think happens, David, when you take someone who comes from a really, really hot, warm climate, and you move them to somewhere that has 190 inches of snow a year? What do you think happens in that relationship?
Uh, Goes on the rock.
Yeah, well, unless you move to what the deep south. So I took her to Washington. That wasn't far enough south. I spent 3 years, and when I went there, a lot of my friends made fun of me in the FBI. They said, "This cyber stuff, this is going to go away by 2006. We're going to arrest every cyber criminal." David, how's that worked out for any of us?
Yeah, that's incredible. I was about to ask you, through the time in the force. I mean, there's so many things that are fundamentally uh, applicable to prevent cybercrime that anybody can do, starting from individuals to large enterprise. And yet, as you mentioned, people thought we're going to solve the problem back in the day, and it was still. We almost seems like it's becoming worse, not better. Like,
I have to agree with you. So I get out of headquarters in 2006. I come to Nashville, Tennessee as the first cybercrime supervisor. And part of my job is to educate the public. And I'll never, ever forget it's 2007, 2008. What is that? 13, 14 years ago. And I am at a large banking conference, and I am explaining to this audience of 150 chief information officers of major banks. And I ask them, how many of you guys are concerned that Russian organized crime is going to impact your organization or clients? And David, what do you think the reaction was when I asked them that question? What do you think?
well, I think back then, I don't know if anybody cared. To be
Yeah.
honest with you.
But in 2008, the FBI is telling the private sector that Russian organized crime is the number one threat to the financial services sector. And then in 2010, we're talking about the fact that the People's Republic of China is hacking into healthcare and all these other things. And that's 2010. In 2015 and 2016, I'm providing guidance about ransomware prevention and the business email compromise. And in 2015, according to Cybersecurity Ventures, the cybercrime problem is a $3 trillion problem. And by today, 2021, it's estimated to be a $6 trillion problem, and it's going to go up to a $10 trillion problem. So look at it. The problem is getting worse year after year after year. But that doesn't bother me as much. You know what's really bothering me, David? The fact that we keep spending more and more money to be safe. So we keep buying products, we keep buying services, we keep spending money on compliance, insurance, attorneys, intrusion response protection. Let me ask you, and even your audience here, what does it mean if we keep spending more and more money to be safe? Because that amount of money is going to go up in the next 5 years. What does it mean if we keep spending more money to be safe and the problem gets worse? What does that mean to you?
Well, it just means it's a bit of an epic fail, if you ask me. There should be some sort of inverse correlation between the amount of
Yeah.
money that we spend and the risk associated with it, right? Or the risk we manage to control.
Absolutely. So here I am. I'm at a conference. I'm giving a presentation. This is about 3 years ago. I've been retired 4 years now. And I'm at there. And after I do this conference, one of the conference organizers comes over to me and says, Scott, we didn't like your messaging. And I'm like, what didn't you like about my messaging? And this is what I talk about. A majority of cybercrime incidents easily could have been prevented. And I go, you didn't like that I said that? And he goes, no, we don't want you saying that at our conferences. I go, why not? He goes, if you keep saying that, people aren't going to want to buy our products or services. And I just stopped.
So you're gonna get yourself banned from these conferences
Well,
eventually if you don't
I'll
stop.
put it this way. No. And that's why I love to do what I do, because you know what? I have a great pension. I have my book. I go out and I found out that I'm the only person talking about information security who doesn't sell a product or a service. Because think about it, everybody, today, a lot of the news is there to scare you. I scare people too, but they're there to sell products and services. And all I try to tell people is this one thing. If most of this stuff could have been prevented, why don't we do that first? Why don't we just stick with the fundamentals, stick with the hygiene? I just got asked today, I turned down an opportunity to speak. They said, Scott, we want you to come over and talk to our group about advanced topics. And I go, wrong guy. Well, what do you mean? I said, and we went through all these different things that they weren't doing. Everybody wants advanced topics, but nobody wants to do the basics, the fundamentals. And during my career with the FBI, when I talked about the 4 truths to cybersecurity, after dealing with 1,000 victimizations, this was the commonalities. Nobody ever expected to be a victim. Why would anyone want to target me? I'm a small business. I'm a nonprofit, especially here in Nashville, healthcare organizations, they didn't think they would be targeted because they were small companies. The best example of a small company was a $300 million company. David, is a $300 million company a small company to you?
Yeah, especially here in the U.S., it's well, not from a revenue perspective, but there are bigger fish to fry. If you're after after some revenue, right?
Yeah,
In
but
terms of
how
cybersecurity.
many records does a $300 million company possess?
Well, that's got to be a lot of records.
Okay, so I would talk to these companies. They didn't think they were big. So you want to know why? Because they were $54 billion companies. So I would talk to publicly traded companies. Companies on the NASDAQ didn't feel victimized, worried, because they weren't on the New York Stock Exchange. I even talked to a company on the New York Stock Exchange that said to me, we're not a target because we're only a $5.5 billion company, and the cyber criminals are only targeting companies that have revenue above $10 billion and above. And this is my empathy nerve. I would pull on this because I'd want to scream, where are you getting your information from? People magazine? The cyber criminals do not care who you are. There's no such thing as a threat profile. I don't want anyone here to go like this. We don't fit the threat profile. That is total BS.
I agree, and I second that. I heard of this tire manufacturer that got hacked, and they say, why we? And they're like 250 people. I don't know how much revenue, but they have one person who does the IT generalist and then IT security as well, cybersecurity. And the thing is, it was potentially a state sponsor that was looking at the manufacturing recipe, quote unquote, for those tires that they
Absolutely.
perfected over 25 years.
And I tell everyone, look, I got good news. The foreign threat actors aren't stealing any more intellectual property because they stole everything. And if you can tell my sense of sarcasm, it's because
Hold on, Scott. Is that sarcasm or is that the truth?
whenever I open my mouth, it's sarcastic. And I want you to understand why. Because time and time again, I would sit down with companies, and I want you to think about this. When the bad guys steal your stuff, your intellectual property, well, I don't have intellectual property. Do you use Salesforce? Do you have a CRM? Do
Scott,
you
we're a knowledge based economy. There's no such thing. Even a chain of restaurants. How you accept the clients, how what kind of recipes, how you train your staff. It's all intellectual property, even if you think you don't have it.
And you know what? You know where it's being stored today? In a SaaS platform without two-factor authentication with a password. And when the bad guys steal your stuff, or when law enforcement shows up at your door because they tell you that all your HR information was on the dark web, or you get hit with ransomware. I just want to tell you, you contact law enforcement, the chances of law enforcement coming to you with a magic wand and fixing the problem is slim to none. And that's a very hard thing. Now, David, I'm going to ask you a question because you interview a lot of people here. So I'm going to put you a little bit on the hot seat.
Mm-mm. Oh,
Here's the question I get all the time.
sure.
This isn't rehearsed. Ransomware. Do we pay the ransom or do we not? What do you do?
Um, well, I've
And
heard
don't tell
both.
me it's a business decision. Okay, that's the easy way out.
Well, I've heard both. I've heard both. I've heard if you pay, then they're gonna, first of all, you don't necessarily get the data back. That's number one. Don't
Mhm.
assume because of some even technical difficulties. The keys don't decrypt everything. And then you're most likely gonna be another target because you paid, so you're like a good client. Um, but if you don't pay and you don't have a backup, then you're screwed. So I mean, again, it's a between a rock and a hard place, really.
Well, when I was an FBI agent and I used to have a serious demeanor, for anyone who knows me, I never have a serious demeanor. Well, here's the deal. I used to go like this. No, we do not pay the ransom because of those reasons. It goes to support bad guys. You might not get your stuff back. I've had companies hit on a Monday, paid the ransom, and got hit again on a Wednesday because they didn't figure out what was the vulnerability. But what's the problem with all of this? When you get hit today, the bad guys they're stealing your information first, and then they're encrypting your backups. So I've had it in situations where a company would call me up and they would say to me, hey, we just got hit with ransomware. And I would say, as long as you got a good backup, you're going to be okay. And there'd be dead silence on the phone. What do you think that meant if there was dead silence?
Did the backup got encrypted?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
how long can an organization survive without access to their information?
Uh, that is, I would say, very minimal time.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let me tell you the greatest myth on information security. I sit down with companies, I go like this. Hey guys, what's your strategy in preventing ransomware? And you know what they tell me? We back up all of our information. Why is that not an effective strategy, David?
Well, because unless there's a air gap between backup and your existing systems, you potentially have the same issue with the backup. It's going to be encrypted.
And
Uh,
I'm still waiting for someone. And a lot of times the consultants, I can always tell I get under their skin. And when I get under their skin, I have a good time.
I can't
Because,
see that, Scott, at all. That you get under
because
somebody's skin.
how does how does backing up have anything to do with prevention? Backing up is very important. I'm not saying don't back up, but if the cyber criminals, and I've been saying this for 5 years, David, and if they can encrypt your stuff, they can steal your stuff. So we have to prevent it. So now we know law enforcement's not going to help you there. The chances of law enforcement putting the bad guys in jail is very challenging. There's been a couple of really big high profile arrests. The FBI, the Secret Service, they do an amazing job. But I want you to process a couple of things that we talked about. The cybercrime problem is getting worse. We keep spending more money, so there's no direct correlation between spending money and being safe. Bad guys steal your stuff, you're probably not getting it back, and the chances of law enforcement putting the bad guys in jail is very challenging. Remember when I told you when I was a new FBI agent, the harder I worked, the better I felt about myself? Well, every day for almost a decade, I'm dealing with companies. We're not talking, and I'm dealing with large enterprises. When they have a problem, they throw a couple of $1,000,000 at it. But I can't tell you how often, David, I would have to look into a person's eyes, look into an organization that employed hundreds of people, and I saw the cyber criminals destroy the organizations. I've seen businesses go out. I've seen senior citizens have their life savings taken from them. I have seen nonprofit organizations where the cyber criminals have stolen their operating account. I couldn't get the money back. I couldn't put the bad guys in jail, and it crushed me. And I really wanted to quit. And then I realized that a majority of the victimizations that I dealt with easily could have been prevented. So now that became my big wake up call. And so when I retired from the FBI at age 50, it was the hardest thing I ever did. I loved working for the FBI. I had such a great time, but I realized that I can do more good outside of the FBI, teaching people how to be safe and being able to be completely unfiltered and being able to go over there and make you understand these things. Because once you understand these simple points, I, I need to give you a cyber secure mindset. And that's what I'm working on now.
And
How do we,
I'd love to dig, Scott. I'd love to dig into in the time we have. Is during these interviews of the 1,000 victims, right? There are certain commonalities, right, that you came across. One, you mentioned the kind of the truth of like, hey, nobody thinks you're gonna get, be the victim or being targeted, but there's other commonalities, right, that you've seen. So maybe we kind of just briefly go through them, and then I'll love that to be the kind of the takeaway if somebody
okay,
has something to learn. If we can cover those.
I'm going to explain to you in a couple of simple steps what people didn't understand. And then we can have this conversation because this is what I can explain in 3 minutes, an hour. I do workshops on this. Cyber criminals only need to steal one thing to destroy your life today. If you listen to this, you're going to understand what impacted 90% of my victims, over 1,000 victims. They didn't realize that a stolen username and password was all the cyber criminals needed to destroy your life. Okay, because what if the bad guys stole your bank account password? What do they get access to?
Yeah, your account.
What if they get access to your Dropbox
um, my data that's in there, right?
data? What if they get access to your email, which also is hooked to your OneDrive?
Well, that's the thing.
That's today's
Emails.
data breach.
Yeah, the
Account
keys to the kingdom.
compromise makes
Hmm.
up 85 to 90%. People need to realize that email is the number one attack vector. And I don't like the way phishing training is done.
It's like the crown jewels. You're right. Everything is an email, right?
Yeah.
People go back to an email stores
Email,
from
text
everything.
messages, telephone calls. My neighbor just got hit with a telephone call from the Internal Revenue Service saying that they'd be arrested unless they paid $30,000. And unfortunately, what do you think this elderly gentleman did?
He wired the money.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
would your parents do? What would our parents do? So we also need to realize that there are almost 8.2 million passwords on the dark web. 66% of the population is using the same password for multiple platforms. I joke, why do people need to fish anymore? All of our usernames and passwords are on the dark web. So I run people through an exercise. What are your mission critical platforms? Where is your information? In the old days, the information was located within the perimeter of the organization. Today, the information is located on different SaaS platforms that are outside of the world of IT because all the departments have it. Once you identify what are those mission critical accounts. So David, what would be 5 mission critical accounts that you think everyone needs to secure at home?
Well, their email, right? Their bank accounts. If they have social media accounts,
Mhm.
I will go there. Their phone. Yeah,
Yeah.
their phone. I was
Two
about to say.
things on your phone because I got good news. Nobody's hacking Macs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You believe
Hmm.
me?
Uh, no.
I used to say, trust me, I was with the FBI. They don't need to hack your Mac.
And you say that with a straight face. I love
I
that.
do. Uh, what happens if the bad, how many, out of those 8.2 million usernames and passwords on the dark web, how many are iCloud accounts, you think?
There's quite a few, and as you mentioned, you don't even need to. There's so much password reuse,
Yeah.
so
And
you just
that's,
need to
yeah,
find a couple.
exactly. So identify it, set up strong passwords. And here's the big takeaway if you do not put two-factor authentication on all of your remote access, the bad guys are going to get into it. I do not care. People tell me, Scott, it's too hard. And I go, all right, don't do it. I don't care. But that's one commonality that my victims didn't have. And even if you do all of those things, bad guys are going to get you on the business email compromise, because think about how many vendors that we have. And then I talk about ransomware. I talk about keeping your family safe. There's so many different things about that. And those, that's it. And now, David, I wrote this great book called The Secret to Cybersecurity. And if any of your readers are looking for a good book by a retired FBI agent who saved the day and put a lot of bad people in jail, don't buy my book, okay? Because that's not what my book is about. But what I'd like to do, I tell people you should only buy my book for the 2 chapters on keeping your kids safe and keeping your elderly parents safe. But what I want to do, and in the show notes, if you can provide my email for anyone who sends me an email or connects with me on LinkedIn, I'm going to give you those 2 chapters. I don't want you
That's
to buy my book.
yeah, that's
I'm,
amazing, Scott. Absolutely, it will take
just do
you.
those things. And let me tell you, David, out of everything we talked about, I bet you I didn't tell you one thing that you didn't already know. But how much money does anyone need to go out today to keep themselves safe?
Well, I personally think that you can do a lot for free.
Yeah,
There's a lot of these tools available for you, like the two-factor, multi-factor authentication.
you do need
You know,
antivirus. I'm going to go out there.
yep,
I'm going to say you do need antivirus, but do what I tell you to do. So, David, give out my email. I'll provide everybody here with a list of these things, and that's it. I mean, that's what drives me to do what I do, because I've seen so much, and the big companies have lots of money to throw at this, but a lot of the smaller companies, the end users, they don't have that. And David, I think we can do a weekly, a daily talk for the next 6 months.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's also interesting as you mentioned that you know, from a trend perspective, things are just getting worse. Even ransomware is becoming a front and center. It seems like almost every hour you hear about a company getting hacked. And then the odds of you staying in business after an incident like that is not good. It's not in your favor. Um, and it's becoming a matter of national security. I mean, it's the SMBs or the medium-sized businesses are the backbone of the U.S. economy. But yet, there's really no one to, as you mentioned, there's no one for you to, unless you help yourself. No one is going to help
And
you.
there's so much information that's out there on this. And the reason, and I think my sarcasm, unfortunately, is my natural self defense mechanism, because I want you to picture this. It's 2006. The FBI comes up with this great guidance. And again, I'll send anyone that same thing. You can find it on the internet. And here I am, David, 2016, with this great document on ransomware prevention. And it's all the same stuff that we're telling you to do today, the core critical controls. Know what's on your network. If you don't know what's on your network, how can you patch? Application whitelisting, reducing admin rights, segmenting your network, 2 factor. And I'm trying to have meetings with everybody and saying, hey guys, I just want to let you know there's this stuff. It's going to help keep you safe. And nobody took me up on my offer. Very few people would ever take me up on my offer.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like people don't want to help themselves. It's
And I
really
don't know if that's
remarkable.
the case. I just don't understand it. Because it's just, okay, how do you get people to take this seriously?
So I think, Scott, I think that well, first of all, what we're doing is, we're helping by creating that awareness, and people that are watching this will have an understanding that you don't want to be the 1,001 victim. And then maybe you and I can potentially get somebody who experienced that on their own company, and get and interview them to see what that's like, because I think that you know just the sheer panic of being in a ransomware situation where you don't have access to your systems, and now the company's at standstill. I don't think anybody understands what the implications, or how much is this situation is paramount to the failure of the company. And maybe that will create, like, people
Well,
to start
yeah.
moving.
And the way that I end up doing it and getting people into my world is being able to just even offering up the information about keeping your kids safe and keeping your elderly parents safe. Because at the end of the day, if it's a business decision, you're going to figure it out. But what happens like, and I had this scenario, and I'll just explain it quickly. And this was a big turning point for me, where I had an elderly gentleman who took his life savings, found what he believed was a bank, and he invested $700,000 into this bank account. And we realized that it was a fake, and it was part of a business email compromise scam. And the money was wire transferred to a bank account in Georgia, the country of Georgia. By the time we traced it all back, it went into a big black hole. And I had to sit down with the family, David, and I had to explain to the family that I couldn't get their money back, and I couldn't help this individual seek justice. And the family literally was destroyed in front of me, and they're hysterical, crying, looking at me like, you're the FBI. And in 2 seconds, with a little knowledge, I know I could have prevented that from happening. That's what drives me to do what I do today. That's why I use my sarcasm, because I'm like, I got to grab people. I got to explain to people that there's so much more at risk. And the same thing with kids today. When I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn and bullying was a full contact sport, I went home and I hid. But now kids are online, and they're sharing information, and they're taking photos of themselves, and there's extortion, and we're seeing kids' lives be destroyed. So that's why, if there's anything that you need to take out of this, is keep your family safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of incident with the elderly, for example, that are not being reported because they're too ashamed to say that they've lost the money.
Yeah.
So we only see almost the tip of the iceberg of what's happening, and BEC, business email compromise. I mean, that's been around for such a long time. There's an FBI page that explains the whole process, and I highly encourage people to get smart on
And
it.
I'll send that all to any of your listeners who take me up. I'll even give away a couple of copies of my signed copies of my book for you having me on here today. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can give out my email, and I'll send you the digital chapters, the information on ransomware prevention, the business email compromise, a list of my framework, just anything you need to stay safe.
Perfect, and hopefully I'll get to do this live with you sometime
Oh, I would
soon
love to. I'm
in
looking
New
for
York
any
City.
excuse to get back to New York. Might
Yeah.
cost you a couple of dozen bagels.
Hey, that's for granted. I for sure will get that done for you. No problem. That and maybe some slices of pizza. I guess
Oh,
that's
I'm
what
in.
you. So, Scott, it's been a real pleasure having you on today. Truly remarkable. I'll provide the links to all the things you mentioned, including the book, and I highly recommend that you follow Scott if you haven't done it so far. Follow his work and invite him to speak if you're in a position to do so, and then be smart about it. Just an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? That's the case with cybersecurity, especially.
Yeah.
So
And
you know
hang out with me. The best way to follow me is on LinkedIn. My website's been down for a while. People are saying, why do you want it back up? I'm like, I don't have patience. But be prepared. The Tuesday after Cyber Monday is what I'm doing videos on today. It's Cyber Criminal Tuesday. 180 million people will be shopping this weekend. Tuesday morning, you're going to get an email from Amazon Best Buy saying your package has been delayed in shipping. Don't be the next victim. David, thanks so much for having me on today.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you for all for watching, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you, and take care. Be well and safe.
Thank you.